So this evening's topic is one that is pretty much universal for women, and the reason why we're speaking of it as an introduction, I'll say a bit more about that later. There's a whole 6-week course on this topic, which will be taking place in the new year, very possibly starting in March around Women's Day. And we'll speak a bit more about that at the end. So this evening we'll cover your moon cycle and some ways in which you can get more in touch with it. We'll also speak about different common kind of menstrual problems and how we can start to regulate these and alleviate some of these issues. So we'll look at diet, we'll also look at the way we think, and the whole kind of body, mind, emotion, feeling organism, and how this works together, and how we can use many natural tools that are available to us to regulate our cycle and to get rid of some of the problems that many of us experience in this area. We'll also look at the concept of our menstrual blood as energy, and what that means, what the implications of this are. And we'll do some reflection and also a Taoist exercise for women's health and the health of the reproductive organs. So for those of you who don't know Venus or who don't know me, my name's Miranda Grace, and I'm part of Venus, which is a women's collective. And our aim and mission is to bring back spiritual values and feminine values to the world, to improve women's lives and through them to have a wider impact in society. We focus a lot sexuality and kind of tantric and traditions. So there's really a lot of ancient and modern wisdom I'm hoping to share and tap into. So the moon. I'm sure many of you saw very recently there was this beautiful lunar eclipse and this beautiful red moon, and I've certainly been feeling more strongly since this lunar eclipse the power of the moon and how harmonizing our relationship with the moon, especially as women, can have a really huge impact in our personal transformation and evolution. So the moon is this traditional symbol of femininity, history, and is also very connected to the subconscious and of course to dreams. So in a lot of traditional mythology and symbolisms, the masculine energy is represented by the sun and the feminine energy by the moon. Now, when I speak about masculine and feminine, I'm generally speaking of them as energy. So these are distinct energies which all of us have in differing proportions, and we can harmonize both of these masculine and feminine energies within us to feel more complete, first as women and secondly as beings. And some of the feminine qualities that I'll speak about, it's not that some men don't have these as well, but that they tend to be more predominant or more kind of naturally awake in women. So women too are feminine, is cyclical in nature. So biological men, they follow the cycles really just of day and night and of time, whereas biological women have the cycles of day, night, time, and also the monthly cycle, or the moon cycle as it's called in some traditions. So it's this whole other way of relating to time, to ourselves and to the world. I heard something recently, one of the first calendars had been discovered etched on a piece of bone. And these archaeologists just assumed it was a man. They said, oh, you know, the first man was, you know, making this lunar calendar, and it's 28 days. And immediately, of course, it was questioned. Why would a man need to mark out 28 days? So, you know, we have this other cycle, which is very much a part of how we experience our bodies and often how we experience the world. And I know some of you might be saying, you know, my menstrual cycle, it doesn't really affect me, maybe especially if you're on the pill. You know, there are ways of kind of overlooking it and kind of carrying on as normal. It's certainly the way that I personally used to think, especially when I was on the pill for many years, which caused me quite a few health complications, which I'll be speaking more about in the course. Yeah, so when I was taking the pill, I was certainly not so aware of my own cycle. And, you know, I didn't really consider it to affect me. I must have had some PMS, because I think most women do. But because I had this high level of disconnection from my body just generally, but also from my cycle, I didn't really feel it. I wasn't really in tune with when things were happening. When I wasn't on the pill before that, I was having regular periods. I used to have polycystic ovaries. And even then, it was just, there was this chaotic kind of element, because I didn't know when it was going to happen. I didn't know when the menstruation was going to come. And it was, you know, there was no way of kind of mapping that. And I think if I had had in that moment more connection to my cycle, if I had actually stopped and consciously mapped it, I would have brought more awareness to how things were happening and to my body and my situation. And the polycystic ovaries might have been cured more quickly than they were in the end. And again, my journey with that and with curing that is something that I speak about more in the course. So in previous times, we were also more connected to the light of the moon. Obviously, all of us know about light pollution. I don't know if you've seen these maps of light pollution and the levels of it in different parts of the world, but there's a huge amount of light pollution. And a lot of us, especially if we're living in big cities, we're just not really street lights and tall buildings. We're not really connected to the moon and to the way that it changes throughout the month. Another thing that you can do, which is especially relevant if you're interested in fertility, is to align with your innate cycle. So that's the lunar phase that you were born in. So if you can work out from your birth date which phase of the moon you were born in, it tells you quite a lot about yourself as a woman. From certain ancient traditions, there's a whole kind of body of knowledge topic about this in Tantra and Kashmir Shaivism, but also by knowing about your and which lunar phase you were born, this reveals apparently your innate ovulation date. So if you're trying to get pregnant, that is particularly useful. So there are 4 phases to the moon cycle. Phase 1 is the new moon. So this is associated in terms of the 4 basic feminine archetypes with the crone or the wise woman. And then there is phase 2, which is the first quarter of the moon phase. And that's the follicular phase in terms of, I'm not going to go super into kind of the biology of things in this talk, because this is information that you can find quite easily online and elsewhere. And we will again look at it a bit more in depth on the course, but you know, this stuff about the different phases physiologically of what's happening, you can find that information online quite easily. So phase 2 is this follicular phase, and associated with the maiden, or kind of this energy of youthfulness, of even hormonally, things are kind of regenerating. Phase 3 of the moon cycle is the full moon, associated with the mother, and that's ovulation, the most kind of fertile time. Phase 4, the last quarter of the moon, is the luteal phase physiologically. And in terms of feminine archetypes, it's associated with the enchantress. So, if you want to connect more to any of these parts of your cycle, if you have issues or things that you want to regulate in any of the parts of this cycle, some things you could do are to connect more to the moon and how it looks, to observe it more and its energies during that period, also the effect of its energies on you. And another thing you can do is connect more to these traditional 4 archetypes. So, for example, if you have issues with heavy bleeding or period pains, you could connect more to the crone or to the wise woman archetype. And this, these ideas of kind of this feminine wisdom and maturity and depth and the kind of wisdom of age, and even embracing death. And that doesn't necessarily mean physical death, but death of, different things in life, the whole kind of cycle of death and rebirth. So in a lot of traditional cultures, and also in the Taoist tradition, there are 2 predominant cycles, and obviously not every woman, especially nowadays, is going to fall into either of these cycles, but you may be closer to one or the other. So the red moon cycle, which is when you bleed on a full moon, has this priestess or leader energy. So in the times of the red tent, or in traditional communities where there were some women who kind of these matriarchal societies, and some women were chosen to be the kind of leaders. The ones who were, so they would be in the minority, the priestesses and the leaders, and they would be bleeding on the full moon. And then in the new moon, when the majority of women were bleeding, they would be kind of caring for them and guiding them spiritually, and kind of maybe looking after as well their children. So if you are bleeding in or around the new moon, you're considered to be on a white moon cycle in Taoism, which means that you are more connected to Mother Nature and kind of to the earth, to the earthly things, and to this motherly energy, or to, kind of reproduction and home building. And there is a belief in some women I know have managed this, that you can, mostly with the power of your mind and of your intention and things like visualization and meditation, you can change your cycle. And I don't know if this has happened to any of you when you were living or working with a lot of other women and you had a certain connection, if your cycle synced. Again, this happens quite often, but it isn't inevitable if it's not what you want. It tends to mean that you have, if your cycles are syncing with women around you, it tends to mean that you have a lot of yin energy or receptive energy. And if you want to change this way of being, you can connect more to a yang, or this kind of masculine energy within yourself. So we'll do just a few minutes of reflection now, and we certainly will have time for some questions and sharing at the end. But as it's only an hour, we're kind of managing things in a certain way. So just for a couple of minutes, I'd like us to reflect a little bit on these 2 very personal questions. So what do you like about your menstruation cycle? Is there a particular way that it makes you feel, or is there some kind of parts of it that you quite like or enjoy? And what do you not like? And whether that's, what are the feelings that you have around not liking it? So is it a type of, are you kind of resentful and annoyed, or is it inconvenient, or are there some things that you'd imagine that your month would just be kind of easier without, some ways in which it perhaps negatively impacts your life? So yeah, either in your journals, or if you want to share anything in the chat, you can write directly in the chat, and we'll just take 2 minutes now to contemplate a bit and reflect personally on these 2 questions. So we'll have another minute, and yes, please do share in the chat if you would like to and if you're ready. So Gemma is saying, I like that after stopping taking the pill, now it's regular and short. I don't like that sometimes it's painful. Thank you, Gemma. Karina, what I like about my cycle is that when I'm menstruating, I see my life in a different light. Things in me that I want to change. What I don't like is that I feel like the rest of the month, I feel more or less the same. Yeah. Thank you, Karina. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge, I think, for most of us, this cyclical nature, and that hormonally, emotionally, physically, at different points of the month, we feel differently. And I think for most of us, it does, as women, impact our lives, and the way that we feel, and kind of the way that our month pans out, because there's this changeability for most of us, which is, it's not easy, you know? Okay, so we'll wrap it up now. Just finish what you're writing. If anyone would like to share by voice their reflections, or if there is any questions so far, now is the moment.
So I actually used to have quite heavy periods, and quite sore, and thankfully they're not anymore. And there's a little video that I've made on YouTube of different energy medicine tricks that you can use to help bring down the pain, and stuff that I've had to do over the years to help with that. So yeah, I'm really grateful that I know different tools to help.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Susie. Yeah, please feel free to share in the chat any links to any resources and things that have helped you journey for all of us. And we're all completely individual. It's one of the great missions. You know, we have so many shared experiences, but we're all unique. So what works for one woman might not work for another. So if there's something that works for you or has worked for you, please share it. Sue says, I like that my cycle is regular and like clockwork on a monthly basis. I don't like that it will come to an end in a few years based on my mum and grandmother's history. Yes. The menopause is, you know, another kind of chapter in our lives as biological women, and it's something that obviously now, with things like hormone replacement therapy, even in the mainstream, is changing, but there are also some ancient tantric and Taoist and yogic kind of methods to stop that from happening in the same way, or to certainly stop the kind of the jarring and a lot of the really difficult symptomatic things that
I would like to say that for many years I've been disconnected from my femininity, and with the period, I felt like being more feminine. But recently, I found out that actually the process is negative, as it does reduce your energy for life, and it's a creative energy that we as women are supposed to use in a different way. So I became really curious about all this, what's happening with the body and with the spiritual energy, and how to control of all of it. So I'm amazed how many things we don't know, and the information that is hidden from us as women.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we'll go into this again in a bit more depth in the course, but there's quite a big alternative perspective on what the menstruation is and even how it originated. There are some people who've done quite a lot of research into this and found that in some tribal societies, there is no menstruation. So, you know, it's something that, again, is very much tied up with religion and with this idea of shame and suffering, and women as somehow being in the suffering role. So we will look a bit later into some of these attitudes, and how if we think of the body, mind, emotion organism as very much operating as a whole, there are some very important ways that we can use our thinking to influence our experience around this as around other things. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Sadia, I'm trying to conceive for the past 3 years, and I hate menstruation for showing up every month. Yeah, it's a mystery how some people conceive without wanting and others struggle. We will speak about natural contraception. That will be kind of more the focus of the course, but there are a few things that you can do from the subtle attitude, kind of meditation and prayer point of view, to help again with the overall mind, body, emotion organism in this direction. Sue, acupuncture worked for me. Conception, yeah, thank you very much for sharing that about the conception. Mara, I'm glad that I'm menstruating in a natural manner. Yes, spent most of my life without menstruating due to polycystic ovaries. Yes. Yeah, I also had polycystic ovaries. Thankfully, I'll just share Madalena. It sounds like someone wants to speak in a sec. Madalena, what I like is that I almost never experienced any pain, whilst some women complain from experiencing a lot of pain. What I don't like, I wish I never had a menstrual cycle nor the bleeding, that the bleeding is an annoying thing. Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, so if no one else wants to share for now, we'll continue. We'll have another opportunity to share further towards the end of this evening. So as I kind of said before, there is quite a big alternative perspective around menstruation. And I'll be sharing some of this research and some of these links. There are some YouTubers and various other things who have done a fair amount of research on this. So this perspective is menstruation necessary? In terms of fertility, as I'm sure most of you know, whether you know someone personally or you just heard of this, it's possible for girls to get pregnant who haven't started their periods, and it's possible for women who are no longer menstruating to also get pregnant. It's possible for those who have irregular periods to get pregnant. It's possible for those who have, 26-day cycle to not get pregnant. So it's a mystery. Even medically, there's not a terrific amount that we know about why why some women find it easy to conceive and others don't. So there was also some research on animals in the wild. So apparently there is no documented history of menstruation in wild animals. It only happens in domesticated animals and animals in the zoo. So not that I'm saying that we are animals, but if you want to look at it from, this mammal kind of physiological scientific point of view, there's also this evidence that shows us how things are for some animals. And in terms of the blood loss, which we'll speak a bit later about this idea of blood and other fluids being energy, which is very core in Tantra and Tao energetic practices. So, therefore, if blood is energy, if it's life force, surely the loss of it is an impediment. It's not something that's going to help us. And, this idea that it's completely normal to us because that's how we were brought up. But, again, if we just try and let go of our preconceptions about that, try and let go of our conditioning, what we were taught, and even just step outside and think about it kind of logically. If someone, any human being, was bleeding once a month from any part of their body, we would think that there was something wrong. So why is it that when women, many women, most women, some women, bleed every month or less or more from their womb, do we consider that it's healthy? I don't necessarily have the answer, I'm just putting it out there. So in the Tantra and Taoist traditions, all of the sexual secretions, sexual fluids, also the blood, are considered to be full of life force energy. And retaining them, keeping them inside you, is believed to be regenerative. That means that it prolongs your life, makes you overall healthier, more energetic, happier, more able to fulfill your aspirations and goals. So in both Taoism and Tantra and some other traditions, men and women practice sexual continence or amorous erotic continence, which is this practice of preserving their sexual fluids as subtle energies. So in the case of men, ejaculating less frequently or even never. And in the case of women, avoiding types of, hold on. Can everyone see the screen still? Yeah? Okay. And the case of women, avoiding types of orgasm which are seen as ejaculatory, where we lose subtle energy, and also reducing or even stopping altogether the menstruation and losing the blood or the life force energy in this way. And the kind of second step of that is that when you preserve these energies, you then need to use it for something. So you need to direct it elsewhere within your body and your subtle system, and you can use it to manifest certain things and certain transformations. Usually in the Taoist focus, it's more on health, and the Tantric focus is more on kind of enlightenment or spiritual goals. But yeah, this idea of preserving this energy. Let me just share again, that stopped working. Sorry, my computer's a bit slow. So some of the ways in which we can preserve this energy, we already spoke about the practice of sexual continence or amorous erotic continence, which we'll speak a bit more about when we're speaking, especially about natural contraception on the course. But we can preserve it also through energy cultivation and moving the energy. So yoga, qigong, ecstatic dance, with afterwards like awakening these energies and then channeling them. and the lovemaking, which we mentioned just before, becoming more conscious of our cycle. And a few of us have mentioned this, kind of taking it back if we've lost it to the pill or to a disorder or to this kind of numbness. And just bringing awareness, wherever we can bring our awareness to this energy, a very beautiful and important process happens inside us. And as I touched on before, reducing and even stopping the blood flow, and certainly reducing and stopping the associated negative impacts, so heavy bleeding, PMS, etc. So diet and supplements, there's really a lot to be said on this. And this is just a brief summary. So for heavy bleeding and PMS, something that this research uncovered, and in fact, if you go on YouTube, whatever your feeling is about this, if you go on YouTube, you can see quite a few raw vegans who stop their menstruation. So raw veganism, massive help. And failing that, just generally being vegan, having a low protein intake, especially in the time leading up to your cycle, because physiologically what we're discharging from our womb is in the blood is mostly proteins and fats. So again, the more of these that we're taking in, especially in the time, the more that our body needs to get rid of, basically. So if you think of it as a type, and again, this can be a bit of a mental switch, but if we just go with it, if we think of it as of the menstruation, of the bleeding as a type of detoxification, the more protein, fats, sugars that you're taking in the second half of the month, especially, the more needs to be cleared out, like with any detox process. So in the Taoist tradition, they give kind of different qualities to the foods, like heat and damp and other things. So they suggest to minimize your intake of damp forming foods, bananas, peanuts, dairy, things like that in the second half of the cycle. And in the tantric tradition, they recommend to cut down on aphrodisiac foods. These are just a few, but chocolate, honey, things like maca, ashwagandha, all of these herbs which have an aphrodisiac effect, but also increase general blood flow. In the luteal phase of the menstruation, it's good to take magnesium. This will also help if you have cramping, and kind of calms any nerves or agitations that we're feeling. B vitamins are important just generally for supporting moods, and also help to metabolize excess hormones. So one of the causes of period pains, apparently, is a lack of ability in the liver to detox and to process things, especially hormones like estrogen. So it could be worth, if you have very bad period pains, looking at your liver, maybe doing a liver cleanse, or just look overall at your liver function, and eating foods that will support your liver generally. Other supplements, if you have sore breasts, especially in the time leading up to your period, that could indicate an iodine deficiency. So most of us are deficient in iodine, actually. It's very common. You can get it in things like seaweed, raw milk, not the most easily accessible things. I'm vegetarian, so I'm not sure what meat foods it's available in, but you can certainly get some really good supplements in terms of iodine. And since I've been taking it, I've definitely had less sore breasts leading up to the menstruation. So PCS, I'll go quite a lot into my journey with this in the course, and how I believe that this was cured in me. And irregular periods, like I said before, energetic practices, yoga, intermittent fasting, things that overall regulate the blood sugar Intermittent fasting is one of them, but there are other supplements that you can take, and just overall kind of watching how they're keeping an eye on your blood sugar levels. Ovarian massage is this Taoist practice that we'll do in the course. And evening primrose oil, that's amazing for all women, regardless of whether you have any issues or not. It's amazing if you have issues. Just take a small amount of it every day throughout the cycle. It's really good for women. Mushroom powders are good throughout. Things like maca and shatavari, ashwagandha, these aphrodisiac kind of energizing plants in the first 2 weeks for most of us. These, if you are postmenopausal, these are very good. They're aphrodisiacs, and they're quite estrogenic as well. And yoni eggs, Venus, we have another couple of courses separately on yoni eggs, but particularly obsidian is very good if there are kind of internal issues or things we need to heal inside. Different crystals are good for different issues within the yoni and within the reproductive system. So now we'll look a bit more about regulation in terms of the way we think, emotions, and attitude. So it's become, quite widely accepted now that we influence things by the way we think, particularly future outcomes. There have been these studies with athletes who've thought positively and visualized their games, and it made them much more likely to win. So it's this attitude shift, believing that you can change things, that you aren't necessarily a victim of circumstance, and that you have a power over your body as you do over your life. And kind of getting out of this victimhood kind of mentality is something that women have kind of had for a long time, and has been encouraged, and it's completely understandable, many things considered. But yeah, this attitude of kind of victimhood and periods on some level, whether you say this or whether you're subconsciously or consciously aware of it, that periods being somehow to do with suffering. Forgiveness. We're going to do a little exercise at the end, which also includes not explicitly forgiveness, but a type of releasing. So our emotions get held in our body. It's one of the reasons why some ladies mentioned before things like acupuncture, massage, energetic medicine. These things massively help, because we are one whole organism. It's all part of it, and our body holds our emotions. So if we're resentful, if we have this pain and this suffering inside us, it's a lot of it is going to sit, it tends to go to the heart as well, but a lot of it is going to go to the womb. And the womb is this kind of storehouse energetically in women of pain and suffering. So, it physically cleans itself out every month, and the emotional clearing out is super important, whether we want to conceive physically or whether we want to use our creative energy in another direction, in order to give the space for that to be maximized. We need to clear out these emotions that we're holding on to, and some of them might not even be ours. There's a lot of generational, ancestral stuff in there, because for many of us, we're the first generation in a while that's had the opportunity to do this. So, we're not just doing it for us. There's ancestral things in there too, which we have the opportunity and the privilege to clear out. And that's a gift, not just for you, but for the ones before and the ones who'll come after. Emotions, super important for women, especially in terms of this maintenance of the life force energy that we spoke about before. So emotional outbursts, especially when we're in PMS, when we're experiencing PMS symptoms, lead us to lose energy. And it's kind of a slippery slope. As soon as we have that outburst, some of our building up energy in our life force has gone. And it can lead also this kind of slippery slope as we go towards the bleeding, to our symptoms kind of snowballing and experiencing even more pain and discomfort when we menstruate. I've certainly personally experienced this when I've had a month where there was some pain, or where I had an emotional outburst where I wasn't kind of aware of my feelings and how they were affecting how I was interacting with others, and I allowed this outburst to happen. I felt much more tired when it came to bleeding, and had quite a lot of pain. And I felt that it wasn't just physical; it was the fact that emotionally, I hadn't been aware of what was happening for me, and I hadn't engaged in this regulation. So emotions and attitudes are really vital. Also having some kind of regular practice, because we are cyclical in nature and we need to pay attention to all parts of the cycle. So including things like breast massage, jade egg or other crystal egg practice, ovarian massage, you can do womb massage, a Vigo, just general physical massage as well, to help us to clear these stagnant energies and held emotions out of our body. Energetic practice we spoke about earlier, things like yoga and qigong, and this regular practice to help us to regulate the way that we're feeling and how our hormones are throughout the cycle. So bleeding, this idea of blood as energy. So if we have cramps while we're bleeding, in the Taoist tradition, it's considered that this is caused by this like stagnant kind of cold, contracted energy in the lower belly. So it's a really good idea to keep warm, especially on the kidneys, especially when you're bleeding. Keep your kidneys really as warm as possible. You can even wrap an extra blanket or something around, and this will really help with pain, any pain, and also with lightening the flow. You can rub and tap the lower sacrum as well, and there are certain yoga poses which help while you're bleeding. On the first day, it's not good to do a headstand, and in some yogic traditions they say that women shouldn't do headstands throughout, but in the Tantra yogic tradition it's just on the first day that it's not advised. Also cobra pose, the plow and shoulder stand can really help if you have pain. I've personally experienced having pain, and within 7 minutes, I know it sounds like a long time, maybe if you don't practice yoga regularly, but within 7 minutes of the cobra pose, if you get tired, you don't have to do it just on your hands, you can do it on your forearms. Within a short time, it's gone for me. To lighten the flow and to also help with pain, mint tea is really good. I drink a lot of mint tea when I'm on my period, almost constantly. Carrot juice, also really good, kind of replaces things that we're losing, and helps to lighten the energies. And eat simple food, unprocessed food, especially during this time, even if you can't avoid the other things in the rest of the cycle. During this time especially, try and avoid chocolate, sugar, proteins, dairy. These things will make the bleeding heavier. It's your body, and everyone's body is totally different. So these are things that work for many women and are advised in certain traditions, but I also invite you to experiment with it. So, try this on your next cycle and see how it goes. And try something else and, share it with other women, because what works for you could very well work for someone else. It's also good to avoid heavy lifting or any kind of straining, as this will increase blood flow and honoring that blood energy. And you can do that in whatever way feels right for you. Some women choose to, especially if they're using a moon cup, to give some blood back to the earth. If they're doing a ritual, there are I know some women who create amazing art and painting using their menstrual blood. And there are some other tantric techniques that we'll go into in more detail in the course. But your relationship with your blood is, and the blood energy is personal, but it's just a suggestion to connect to it more. And again, using a menstrual cup or a moon cup really helps with this. It certainly helped me a lot, because looking back on when I was using just tampons and pads, it's just another piece of, okay, it's not plastic, but it's another piece of cotton material, and you just throw it in the bin. And again, you don't have this connection with it. And to begin with, you might feel a bit gross, maybe it freaks you out, but part of what we try to do, especially in the women's circles here at Venus, which Andrea and I do bi-weekly, but just generally part of our mission in Venus is to help women to support women to embrace their bodies. And that's like in its totality. So it's not just embracing your body, when you're feeling really good about it and you're wearing nice lingerie. I mean, that's also part of it, but it's also embracing the fluids, the blood, and this comes from you. It's not disgusting. It doesn't, nothing to do with our bodies. It's disgusting. It's good to have this attitude of honoring and embracing and acceptance towards the blood energy as well. Okay, so we're going to do a little exercise, and after that, I would love if anyone wants to share anything or ask any questions, share anything about their experience. Susie, I'm just seeing, I don't know. Okay. Yes, about healing the polycystic ovaries, I speak more about that in the course. It's, amongst many of the things I've mentioned today really helped, but I'll go more into detail. Mara, I healed with alternative therapies using alchemistry-based products made with Brazilian plants, minerals, alchemistry principles, absolutely. I mean, Tao and Tantra are alchemy. It's this alchemy of the human experience and the human body and emotions. So yeah, that's really in keeping with what we do at Venus also. And yeah, we'll speak a bit more about plants and supplements on the course. Surprised about the chocolate, as you get huge cravings because it seems to have lots of iron. Yeah, I know. Do an experiment with it and see how it works with your body, if it lightens the blood flow. And there are obviously other ways that we can get hold of the iron. Yeah, I mean, it's personal. So Madeleine is sharing that Cobra Pose just amplified her bleeding. It's personal. Different things work for different women. So it's really good to know yourself and to know what works for you, and to be able to share this with others. Because there are things which work for many, but again, it's a lot to do with typologies, and there's not a one size fits all. One of the things that we go into in quite a lot of detail on the course is there are 4 typologies of how to experience the different stages of the cycle, and specific recommendations. And there's a little quiz that you can do to identify yourself in this. And we'll have some specific recommendations for each of the 4 typologies of plants you can take, practices you can do, etc., to help alleviate some of the associated issues. Okay, so please close your eyes and just become comfortable in the chair or on the floor, wherever you're sitting. Take a few slow, conscious, deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And try to drop your awareness down from the mind into the body, into the heart. Drop your awareness and your attention down from the heart into the womb, the ovaries. And you can kind of see them in your mind's eye, whether you see them as they look or whether you see them as a bowl or a flower or a ball of light or energy, however feels right for you personally. Try to hold this sense of your womb and your reproductive area in your imagination. And if it helps you to connect, you can place one hand on your heart, one hand over your womb. And just keep breathing into those areas. Feeling how amazing it is to have this body. Very good. And slowly, please move your hands, keeping your eyes closed, and place them in front of your hip bones. And as you breathe in, feel the breath expand like a beach ball into the whole of your hips, lower belly, sacrum, womb, ovaries. On the exhalation, through the mouth, totally relax. Keep breathing in, expanding, filling the whole area like a ball. The womb, the hips, the sacrum, the lower belly fills with air. And now on the exhalation, we're going to consciously breathe out any wounded, frustrated, resentful, sad feelings like cloudy, grey smoke. And we use the power of creative imagination as we breathe, creative visualization. As we breathe in, we breathe bright, golden energy into our womb, into our lower belly, into our ovaries, whole reproductive system. And as we breathe out, a grey cloud, releasing with it any wounding, dissatisfaction, frustration, pain. It all goes. We'll do this in our own rhythm just a few more times, breathing in and filling our whole lower belly and reproductive area with golden light. Breathing out through the mouth, very deliberately, a grey cloud filled with any negative, resentful feelings that are stored in this area. And as we take our last in-breath, we see this golden light expanding and completely filling our womb, completely filling the tubes, the ovaries, the whole area, relaxing it. It smiles, filling it with love and healing. We breathe out the last grayness. This golden light remains like a glow. Enlightening and igniting the whole of our system, of our bodies and our world. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. So what we just did is the type of womb breathing, and it's one of the Taoist exercises that's recommended as a menstrual practice. There are others, ones that help you to warm up the ovarian energy, ones that help specifically during the bleeding to lessen the bleeding, ones that can help us increase certain types of hormones. So there's a whole world available to us, which we'll go more into during the course. So we're almost done for tonight. Would anyone like to share finally something, share about their experience or how they're feeling, or any final questions tonight? Well, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really, really grateful, and I feel that it's super important that women come together to speak about these things in different ways, and to bring some light to this, because it's something that now a lot of us experience kind of, we all have it, maybe sometimes with our friends or our mum, but it's actually quite an individual and can be lonely process, but yet it's practically universal for women. So I feel like there's something very sacred and traditional about when we come together to, in different ways, speak and share about these things. So the course will probably start in February or March, and you'll all receive an email about it just beforehand. It's a 6-week course where essentially we'll go more into depth about the different topics. In here, not so pretty font. Here it is. Essentially, we're speaking more in depth about things including natural contraception and also natural conception. We'll have some women speaking about their sublimation journey. These are women who, in the tantric and yogic practices, have managed to reduce or either stop the menstruation, the bleeding. They still have a cycle, but they've reduced the symptoms and reduced or stopped the bleeding. And I'll share more about my personal journey with the PCS. And we'll have a self-healing ritual or ceremony at the end. So yeah, thank you so much for this evening. I'm Miranda Grace and I'm part of Venus. And here's a little bit more about our events for the rest of the year, our website and social media. And thank you all so much for being here again. And I hope to see you again before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miranda. I was totally spaced out, so I don't really want to chat, but that was really lovely and really moving exercise. Thank you. It was really informative as well. Thank you. Have a lovely night. Okay.
You as well. It was great to see you. So yeah, Sadia and Sue, I'll leave you ladies to it, or maybe you can connect on Venus social media.